So, welcome to week 8's Screencast. I want to apologize to you again that this is so late. I've just been swamped with a ton of stuff, as I'm sure you all are. But hopefully, giving you till Friday to do your discussion post based on this reading will give you enough time to look over this. It's complicated stuff. It's like the consequentialist essay or article rather in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. This one is difficult. Basically, it's going through, much like the other consequentialist article as well, it's going through the history of kind of the arguments that lead up to all these different versions of deontology, or what I'm calling subpoints in some of the materials. And these are important to learn, or at least to have some introduction to, because as I've said in your papers, you'll be analyzing an actual dilemma, not an actual dilemma, a dilemma that you can imagine that you'll face in the next 5 or so years. You know, a dilemma that may face you in a position that you're likely to have. Anyway, so I think understanding these subpoints is really going to help you do the analysis, both for the discussion prompt and for the final essay of Unit 2. So this deontological ethics page starts with really the definition of consequentialism, because deontology, as you'll read, in many ways is a philosophical system that responds to consequentialism. This is another thing I mentioned a couple of times that I'll touch on just briefly, is this idea of moral intuition. So this is that gut feeling we get of right and wrong, right? We know some things just feel wrong, other things don't necessarily, some things feel right, it feels good to do. And that feeling, really what the whole field of ethical philosophy, and this is a simplification of course, but the whole field of ethical philosophy is an attempt to describe in language and with logic consistent, coherent systems that describe that, why you get those feelings. So basically, consequentialism has some failures, as you can imagine, and deontology is a response to that and is deontologists hope to kind of fill in the holes that consequentialism has logically. So that's this first section really talks about that. The second section, these are the subpoints. So they're agent-centered, patient-centered, contractarian, and Kantian theories. You'll notice this is the German philosopher Immanuel Kant. Then it goes into advantages and weaknesses. So this is if you're going to argue for deontology, you would argue for it using these advantages. If you were going to argue against it, you would argue against it using these weaknesses. And that gives both responses, the advantages, and then responses, and then weaknesses and responses in these two. Then the next thing that I would really look at, this relation to consequentialism reconsidered is interesting reading. I would definitely read it. But it's really interesting, I think, to look at deontological theories and meta-ethics. So this is a question about whether or not deontology is normative, in other words, teaches you how to behave, or is basically descriptive, tells you how you already behave. Then again, I would urge you to keep this page bookmarked or come back to it as you're writing your paper, because this is a great collection of sources that you will be able to just simply Google. And hopefully you'll be able to find these and you can use them in your paper, and that'll save you a lot of trouble. As usual, please let me know if you have any questions or comments or concerns.